Thanks for coming. So great to see such an awesome turnout here tonight. Thank you so much. We're excited to hear how you heard about our event. And we're holding these winter workshops every winter. Usually there's 3 to 4 in a series, and this is the 3rd and final one for this particular season. So my name is Tova Tillinghast. I'm the director at Underwood Conservation District. And again, we really thank you for your time being here. And with us tonight is Melissa Elliott with Melissa Bees. Yeah, she's a landscape designer and contractor, owner of Melissa Bees. And she bases her business right here in White Salmon, and she's going to show us some of her landscapes around the gorge and that feature native plants. So you'll get to see a lot of great projects on the slides here. And then also I want to introduce my coworkers. I've got James Osmolowski. He's our farm planner and technician at Underwood Conservation District. Corey Podolak is our project specialist, and if you've heard about the Tree of Heaven program, that's her fun project. And then Jan Thomas here. She's my IT expert. She's helping manage this. So it's great. We have quite a few people. I don't know how many on Zoom.
Yeah, we've got probably 10 folks online with us too. So
yeah, joining us. So we've tried this hybrid format, and it's been a learning experience, I would say. We've done the online workshops through the pandemic period, and now we're going to the in-person events again, while maintaining the Zoom options. So it's been interesting. We appreciate you being here in person. Seeing everyone face to face is always valuable. And then if you're online, we hope you're enjoying the benefits of being at home. And we're offering the best of both worlds tonight. So for those of you in the room, just know that there are restrooms through this side door if you need to get over there. And then help yourself to the snacks and beverages over here anytime. And for those of you on Zoom, a couple of quick reminders, just to keep yourself muted throughout the presentation, and then you can put your questions in the chat box, and we'll take a few questions possibly during the presentation, but definitely at the end of my presentation, we'll do Q&A. And so Jan is there to help kind of manage that, and we'll be ending the Zoom portion at the end of my presentation. And then Melissa will take the stage with the in-person and interactive drawing exercise that we'll get to do too. All right. All of our workshops are being recorded, and so we make those recordings available on our website. We have a news and events page on our website, so that's where you can find our past webinars and events like this. So you can go back and find those, and I want to make sure to advancing. Here's our agenda for the evening. I kind of covered some of that, but I'll be presenting first. Melissa will present next, and we'll have a design scenario exercise. Our past winter workshops, like I was saying, have been recorded and posted online, and you can see a list of a lot of the topics that we've covered in the past. There's been a lot of really good topics covered, from beaver habitat and restoration work to carbon markets for forest landowners, biochar, and this year we had both the wildfire resilience topic and water rights and water conservation opportunities presented. So if you want to go back and learn about any of those topics, please do that, or share them with your neighbors and your friends. If you know anyone who should have been here tonight, this one, at least my part of it, will be posted online at a later date, within a week or so. So thank you again. I want to make sure that we announce that our native plant sale is happening. So it's online currently. We started on January 2nd, right? January 2nd this year, which is a little bit later. It's been in the November, December timeframe in the past, but we just nudged it into the new year, and then it ends February 29th. So you can go online and order native plants for your own landscape. And then by the date of March 23rd, we'll be having this great event called Tree Fest, and it's right here out in the park outside of our office. And our office, by the way, is just next door in the same building. And Tree Fest is a really fun event if you haven't been there. Some of you have, I know. And you come pick up your native plant orders. You can peruse all kinds of tables full of information from partners like the Forest Service, the Native Plant Society, the Columbia Land Trust, Mount Adams Resource Stewards, all our friends and partners come with their booths and information that you can learn from. There's live music, and sometimes there's free dirt being given away by dirt huggers. So I can't promise that this year. They haven't said that yet, but you never know. And then we also have the walk-up sale where you can buy individual stems of native plants. So if you didn't order ahead of time, you can still get a few of those species you might be looking for at the day of sale. So mark your calendars for Tree Fest on March 23rd. All right, and with that, I'm just gonna I have to cover a little bit about who Underwood Conservation District is, just so everyone knows. We're a public agency. We're a local natural resource agency that convenes the public, landowners, stakeholders, folks like you to come together and learn. And we provide lots of information about all kinds of different topics. And we are also a source of project support. We're locally led. We have a local board of supervisors that volunteer their time to help guide our work. We're non-regulatory. We don't have to go out and enforce laws and rules, which makes us the good guys in government. We're neutral, and we're just a source of natural resource support and assistance on all kinds of topics. Watershed restoration, water quality, upland habitat, oak woodlands, native plants, as you'll hear, noxious weeds, fish habitat, lots of different topics. This is our mission statement: to engage landowners and land users throughout Skamania and West Klickitat counties in the voluntary conservation, enhancement, stewardship, and sustainable use of natural resources. We were established in 1940 after a law was passed in Washington State. RCW 8908 allowed conservation districts to exist in Washington State. And as you can imagine, this was in the wake of the Dust Bowl, and nationally, people were opening their eyes up to conservation and realizing they needed to do something to conserve their soil and their other natural resources. So that's when conservation districts all across the United States were established, including us in 1940, right in Underwood. So that's why we're named Underwood Conservation District. Yeah, I think so too. So Underwood, as the name does not imply, encompasses a huge area. We're all of Skamania County and Western Klickitat County here, obviously based right here in White Salmon. So we cover a large area. These are all the other conservation districts in Washington State. And as you can see, there's the Cascade Crest coming down the middle of the state. And we are the only conservation district that gets to be on both sides of the Cascades. So we get the best of both worlds again with the west and the east sides of the Cascades. And here's another little close-up of our district area. It actually includes Mount St. Helens, not quite Mount Adams, but the Western Flanks. And as you know, probably that most of the northern part of this area is national forest. There's a lot of public land in our conservation district, and we primarily focus our work on private lands. But we also work with the national forests occasionally. All right. I've already talked a little bit about all the different types of work we do, and this is kind of the smorgasbord of various natural resource topics that we've worked on over the years. We are grant funded, so a lot of times we'll have our long range plan and our long range strategies of what we're focusing on in this area, but our work is also somewhat dictated by where we have funding at the time. So that's part of what we can focus on is where we have the grants. We'll talk a little bit about the Yard by Yard program and the Farm Tool Library specifically tonight, just so that gets planted in your head. Those are key programs for anybody trying to establish native plant landscapes. The Farm Tool Library just got established about 3 years ago. We have an actual shed, a tool shed located a few blocks away at the Mountain View Grange in White Salmon, and we make tools available for loaning. And you can purchase a couple different levels of membership, and then you can even apply for a scholarship. I won't advertise that too much, but you can do that and borrow tools throughout the year. So James is the primary contact for the Farm Tool Library. We have a lot of different tools, over 100 different tools available. And you can also just browse online when you go to our website and see physical or actual pictures of our tools available and sort by what kind of tools you're looking for and just get an idea of what's available. We're about to launch the Farm Tool Library again for the new year, March 8th. It is open, but more as a as-needed basis right now. And then it'll have regular open hours on Wednesdays and Fridays starting March 8th. So stay tuned to that and definitely keep that in mind if you've got a planting project or other things going on at your place. And then the Yard by Yard program, I want to mention Corey here is the primary contact for that program. And this is our own version of a backyard habitat program. And you might have heard of something like this, like in the Portland metro area. Columbia Land Trust and the Audubon Society have a really great program there. And we mirrored a lot of what they have done with our program. So we have a checklist online and you can go on and basically walk yourself through it. And it's a self-paced program, so you can really just pick and choose what you'd like to do when and how fast and what kind of support you may need. And then someone like Corey can come make a site visit with you and also consult and give ideas. And then again, whenever you're ready, you can call us back and say, I'm ready to be checked and certified, and you can go home with a Yard by Yard sign and be a proud new member of the Yard by Yard program. So check that out on our website and get a hold of Corey if you're interested. So with that, I think I will just get started with the actual content of the night. Any initial questions off of what I've already presented? Okay, sounds good. Well, we're excited to talk about native plants tonight, Melissa and I. I'm going to start us off with just a general overview of what are native plants, why do we care about them, why are we promoting them, and some of the actual native plants you might consider in your own native plant design. So the definition here of a native plant is they're native, the plants, native plants are plants that are endemic, indigenous, or naturalized to a given area in geologic time. This includes plants that have developed or occur naturally or existed for many years in an area. And in the Columbia Gorge, we have a lot of endemic plants that are unique to the Columbia Gorge. So they are native plants here. And then as you saw on that map, if you're going from the east to the west side of our district, there are certain plants that will be native to the east side of the gorge and not native to the west side because of the different environments. So a native plant the definition has a lot of nuances. But yeah, again, there's so many ecoregions between whether you're on the east or the west side of our area, or even at a low elevation versus a high elevation, a north or south slope, you will have a different little plant community in these little pockets and areas. So what may be native to Lisle or Washougal, those are not going to be always the same plants. And then of course, native plants are not classified as noxious weeds by the state or the county. So they're not causing problems. They've evolved here in this area and they don't invade and take over places like a lot of exotic and invasive plants do. Yet, a lot of people will not really know what they're looking at and just still call them weeds. So a lot of native plants really do get misidentified as weeds, just as a generic term. So why do we care about native plants? They're beautiful, that's for sure. You're gonna see some wonderful pictures of native plants tonight. Again, because they're from here, they're adapted to our climate and soil conditions. So they grow well. If they're in the right place, they will grow well, they're well adapted. And because of that too, they don't need extra irrigation. They'll maybe need a little bit to get established in the beginning, but over their lifetime, they conserve water and they need very little maintenance or extra inputs, if any. They're hardy because again, they're co-evolved to this environment and they can usually handle the seasonal stress. Climate change is adding a little bit of more stress, but yeah, they are usually resistant to native pests and diseases. And then this is one of the most important points is that they provide food and habitat for other native species. So we have insects, we have birds, we have rodents and small mammals and large mammals, all of these animals in the ecosystem that rely on their habitat and the native food in that habitat. And right in your own backyard, you can promote backyard biodiversity and create habitat right in your yard. So it's astonishing that we have landscapes that are just sterile deserts. This is the alternative to a native plant landscape. So how did we ever decide that a green flat lawn was a beautiful thing? It has purposes, it has some functions if you are a soccer player or a golfer. There's places for green grass like this, but you have the choice in your own yard to do something different. We also have many, many invasive, exotic, and noxious weeds. They were originally often introduced as ornamentals or garden plants. So unfortunately, we did not know the long-term consequences of bringing some of these exotic plants into our area, and they have taken over certain areas. This happens to be a picture of kudzu, which luckily we don't have in this area, but we have English ivy, and we have Himalayan blackberry, and a whole plethora of other noxious weeds, and we have some booklets over here to help people identify different invasive weeds that they may have in their yards. So again, these invasive weeds often start as garden plants or pretty ornamentals, but then they can take off and really become a problem in wild spaces and everywhere. And what these native or invasive plants do, the noxious weeds, is that they can take over so much that they degrade and simplify habitat. So the birds and the insects can't thrive off of those plants. They may not be able to even eat that food, whatever it is. And it just simplifies and takes away all the diversity and complexity that native animals rely on. Unfortunately, we have had major loss of habitat in the United States. Less than 5% of undisturbed space is left. We have chopped our lands into habitat islands, and that leads to local extinction. We've converted 8 times the area of New Jersey to lawns. And this is actually a 2007 statistic, so I'm sure it's much worse today. This is from Doug Tallamy's Bringing Nature Home. We have smaller habitat area that amounts to fewer species, fewer habitat, and fewer species able to thrive and live. The World Conservation Union estimates that 12% of all bird species are threatened with extinction because of habitat loss and invasive species. And a quarter of all bird species will be functionally extinct within a century. There are just major losses happening. And yeah, birds are one type of animal that are key to our ecosystems and the functioning of entire food webs. So with some of those species going away, there's major collapse potential. But the good news is, yay, we can do something on our own individual level, and together in a collective way, there's a lot we can do. It is now within the power of individual gardeners to do something that we all dream of doing to make a difference. In this case, the difference will be to the future of biodiversity, to the native plants and animals in North America, and the ecosystems that sustain them. And again, that's Doug Tallamy. And we recommend his books. We have at least one book over there for reference. So again, there's a lot of benefits to native plants. Again, it provides wildlife habitat, birds, bugs, bees. We, of course, benefit from native plants. We can eat the berries, we can use the canes and enjoy the flowers. There's a lot of benefits we enjoy. They can have a function and a purpose in your yard. They can serve as fences, living fences or hedgerows, visual screens from your neighbors. And they function really importantly as stormwater managers. You can use native plants to help absorb stormwater and rainfall and collect runoff and keep water on your land longer so that it doesn't just run off down the street, down the gutter into the storm drain, carrying pollutants with it. So it's really key. These native plants and the way you use them can be really key to preventing water pollution and even conserving water in the soil and on the landscape. And then soil health is key. If you can stop polluting your soil with a lot of inputs, herbicides, fertilizers, whatever it is, but then foster soil health through the planting of native plants, that's super important. That's going to be really good for soil health And again, water retention and soil retention. Just having your bare dirt planted with beneficial plants is going to retain the soil. We use native plants a lot in the conservation district to protect stream banks. We plant riparian buffers, and that protects the soil there and keeps it from eroding away from the stream, but also provides really important habitat and runoff buffering to keep runoff from getting into the streams. So they serve a really important function on a large scale. And we have a great booklet over here that's all about fire-resistant native plants. So we can encourage certain plants that are going to be fire-resistant and less flammable and safer to have around your home. And then again, if you occupy a space with native plants, you're much less likely to have invasives coming in and taking over. So someone asked me the other day, how do I prevent noxious weeds? What herbicide do I use? And I said, well, first of all, don't disturb the ground. Don't clear the ground and open it up and invite all of the invasives coming in. As soon as someone, clears all the dirt or clears all the vegetation away and just has bare dirt, they're just inviting native or invasives to come in. So native plants occupying space really will prevent noxious weeds from coming in. I already mentioned visual screens, but they're beautiful, they're aesthetically pleasing. Native plants are beautiful. You will see that soon in some photos. So in terms of designing and planting in your own yard or your own space, wherever you are, here's a couple things to think about. There's different plant types. And of course, that may be a simple concept, but it's good to remind yourself. There's the lower growing bunch grasses, sedges, ground covers, forbs. Those are going to serve a purpose in your yard or your space. That's lower growing and not going to block a view if you want to have a view, for example. There's shrubs that can be kind of in the intermediate zone and serve a different purpose, just kind of filling that space between the ground and the upper canopy. And then of course there's trees. So if you've got the right space for a tree or a whole forest, that's wonderful. Just don't plant trees under your power lines or somewhere where they're just not going to be able to thrive next to the sidewalk, between the sidewalk and the driveway in this much space. So definitely think about the plant types that will be most appropriate in your yard. And then another concept is just to think about complexity, that multiple levels of plant types is really valuable to have that diversity and complexity in the habitat. The birds are going to love it, just having lots of options to go up and down on the branches. And then same with the other critters and insects that occupy different spaces. But it's really great to just have as much diversity as possible and irregular edges. So if you have the option to make things less clean, less straight, that's a good thing for habitat and the critters that rely on these native plants. I mentioned the different plant communities. Depending on where you are in the gorge, you're going to have a whole huge variety of different plant communities. So of course there's stream sides and riparian areas and wetter areas. There's uplands that are usually drier. Again, you might consider your north and south aspect and whether you get a lot of sunlight or shade. In the east end of the gorge, we have oak savannas, and those have a whole different host of different types of plants that grow around oaks. And we have prairie lands and high desert lands. And then we have dense, deep, dark, wet forests. So depending on where you are, where your property is, you're going to have a whole different type of plant community than someone else in this room. So think about that. What kind of plant community can you support? And right plant, right place is a mantra that we tell people all the time with the native plant sale. Just make sure you know what would thrive here. Look around you. What grows in the forest next door, and you can emulate that or mimic that. This is a picture from Catherine Creek, and so as you can imagine, the soils are super shallow on this basalt rock, and there's only a few species, or a lot of different species, but a type of species that really thrives there. You couldn't really plant a western red cedar and expect it to live. So again, question whether you have moisture, is there a stream or another type of water body nearby? Can you irrigate it, especially just to get it established in the beginning? Is there a lot of sun, shade? Are there large trees nearby that will also shade this space you're planting? And then you can look up your soil type if you don't already know what it is. There's an online web soil survey, and we can help you find your soil type if you don't know how to do that. And then we also offer some soil testing. So talk to James tonight if you're interested in soil testing. But it's really important to know what you're starting with, what you're working with for soil. And then do you have wind? Ding. Probably most of us have wind. But that's a big factor. You know, the drought tolerant and more hardy plants will survive better with wind. And if you're planting a more sensitive plant that won't tolerate it, just really choose the right location that's more sheltered for those plants. And of course, you have to consider the human needs of this space. So if you live there, if you're using that space for certain things, that's obviously a factor. So what kind of site constraints do you have? Do you have sidewalks? Do you have curbs and driveways and drains and septic systems and things that you need to work around? And then what are the opportunities? Maybe having that really annoying wet spot that's always muddy in your yard, maybe that's an opportunity to use the moisture in that land to plant something that loves water. You may come up with your own design criteria, like tonight. You could start thinking, well, I definitely want something that's evergreen or that covers up my neighbor's ugly fence or whatever it is that you're gonna wanna think about. Start listing what your own needs and interests and design criteria are. So I'm gonna move into the stage where I get to showcase a few of our favorite native plants. And I'm gonna go by plant community, more or less. So starting with streamside plant communities. These are just an example, a smattering of some of the plants that you might think about for a wet, moist streamside or even a ditch, if you have that running through your property. And then there's a handout that's on the table over there that has a lot of plant species listed. And there's some, like, I guess there's symbols or something that will tell you whether they're shade tolerant or sun loving or moisture, require a lot of moisture or really drought tolerant. So there's a really good reference sheet right there that I recommend. But this picture is of Douglas spirea, and you'll see this growing along ditches. It loves water, and it's a beautiful flowering native plant. So it prefers moist soils and sun. So you'll want to have like the right combination for that particular plant, but it shows up again in ditches, on wetlands, along streams and creeks all over this area. And then some of the other species, I kind of start with the smaller, low growing stuff at the top, and then the medium shrubs listed there. Those are all beautiful, great examples of native plants. And then the trees, if you have room for a streamside wetter area, these are beautiful trees to consider planting in your space. Here's a picture of red osier dogwood, and as you can tell, it's got a lot of beautiful features, lovely white flowers, red stems, and beautiful fall foliage. Here's serviceberry. Again, the beautiful flowers, just it can get covered in these white flowers, and great red color in the fall. And it prefers sun and or partial shade, so it's actually somewhat versatile, but it's drought tolerant. And where I have kind of a hell zone in my yard, serviceberry has thrived, and I'm really appreciative of serviceberry. Cascara prefers moist, wet soils. And you'll see this in west side forests often, but also along the White Salmon River in more wet riparian zones. And it tolerates some sun and dry conditions too. So again, it can be versatile, but it prefers more wet areas. But it's beautiful. These berries are a favorite with birds. Pacific ninebark is a shrub that we also sell in our native plant sale. And you see its white flowers, and it's got these really lovely little clusters of red buds, or there's like after the flowers kind of fade away, they're just really pretty colors. And again, the leaves turn color, and it's got great fall foliage. Prefers moist soils, right along streams, you'll find it. Mock orange is one of my favorites because I'm from Idaho, and I learned it as the state flower as a kid, and it's just a lovely plant. Prefers well-drained soils. Again, it's survived well in my area in Snowden, in some dry areas, but it can also, you'll find it on stream sides and creek sides. So moving up to the upland plant communities, most of us are probably more in uplands. And this is where you need drier, drought-tolerant plants just because they're not right there on the stream in the lowlands. And for ground covers, Oregon grape is a rock star. Salal, kinnikinnick is wonderful for covering ground. Heartleaf buckwheat I planted on the other side of this building on the south side, and it grows great. Lupin, we're probably all pretty familiar with its beautiful purple flowers. For the shrubs, we have a couple of different currants, wild roses, vine maple, serviceberry. Elderberry is also a rock star. You can plant a tiny little thing and it'll just shoot up new canes many feet per year. Schooler's willow is an upland willow that you can see here in the photo with its little pussy willow buds there, plus the leaves. And then of course some larger trees that we all love and probably already know. Oregon white oak is one. I would just say if you have Oregon white oak, don't cut it down. You can't replace them. It takes hundreds of years. But we also sell the little oak seedlings, so you can start from scratch too with them. Red flowering currant, it just happens to be everyone's favorite. It's beautiful. It has these gorgeous big clusters of pink flowers, and the bees and birds and bugs love them. The berries are good too. So this one is awesome in terms of thriving in both shade and sun. It's drought tolerant. It does really well in this area where I've seen it. And then golden currant is a little more of an eastern side currant, a little more drought tolerant, and it's great too. It's just got almost silvery gray leaves and also a currant that you can eat. Oregon grape I mentioned, it's really hardy. Once it's established, they're hard to get rid of, but that's a good thing when you're trying to cover space and provide habitat. They're deer resistant too, which is handy. Snowberry, we have hedges and hedges of snowberry at my house, and it's really great. I mean, again, the habitat it provides, there's just tunnels for critters and birds, and they can hide. They just cover ground really well once you have it established. Little pink flowers are really cute, and they're very drought tolerant. Roses, we have a few different wild roses, but Nootka rose is one, tolerant of sun and shade and drought. Another rock star, and these rose hips, not to mention, have medicinal value for vitamin C. Vine maple is a beautiful one with fall foliage. It can really sprawl and get big, up to 25 feet. So make sure you have room if you're planting that. And then Indian plum is one that not as many people know about, but I love it because it's one of the first ones to come out with leaves in the spring. So it's like the first sign of spring when it finally starts coming out. All right, blue elderberry is another big favorite. I already mentioned how great they can grow, get really tall to fill a space vertically if needed. And then of course those berries are medicinally powerful as well. We use them at our house for syrup and juice. And so that was a really quick overview of some plant species. Again, that sheet over there is a good cheat sheet, and we have a lot of books, and then those of us in the room can try to advise. Melissa will talk more about some of the native plants she uses in her designs. But here's just a few more slides to think about with what you might consider for designing your own space. Again, you want multiple layers, so don't forget about the small herbaceous plants or the large trees, and you need everything in between too. That's just going to provide really valuable habitat and diversity and interest for your eye as well. Think about overlapping bloom times, because that's really important for the animals that thrive and really survive off of these plants. So as much as you can have those overlapping times with flowers and fruits, coming in, then the animals that survive there will just be much more happy. And then I've talked about the variety of plant structures, but you also want to think about evergreen plants versus, ones that drop their leaves. Some are fruit producing, some are thorny. There's all these different characteristics of the plants that you might want to think about depending on your needs and design criteria. Again, we want to leave areas undisturbed as much as possible. So going through and cleaning up your yard, your garden is not always a good thing. If you can leave things as they are, leave the woody vegetation there, leave the leaves on the ground, if they're not causing problems, just use it as mulch. And those are important nesting and egg sites for all the little animals that may be living there, or overwintering and hibernating. So again, curves and clusters are really more useful and valuable than linear boundaries and solitary patches of plants. So if you can have kind of a mosaic of plants that weave together and connect, that's going to be even more valuable as habitat. And then just think about food cover and water, the key criteria for any animal that is trying to live there. We're talking about food with the plants, cover with the plants and the plant structures, and then water. If you can provide any source of water in that habitat, that's even better. And one of the best benefits of native plants is that they don't need inputs. They've co-evolved here. You don't need to fertilize. You don't need to add pesticides. And it frees up your yard from poison. So that's always a good thing. Talked about water features. Yeah, and then a few other considerations. Think about outdoor lighting, whether you're, shining too bright of lights out there for the birds and the other critters that are out there. There's something that crossed my mind with outdoor lighting. What was it? Oh, that was it. I knew I wanted to mention this one, but yeah, nest boxes and bee houses and bat boxes. You might think about all those things too. Providing cover, providing habitat and hideaway spots for these animals is really valuable. Okay, so to review, when thinking about what will best suit your property, what are your plans? What are your needs? Are you planning on building a playground for the kids, or are you wanting a wild space for the animals? Think about what exactly your needs are. You can have different zones in your yard that meet different needs. And then what are the purpose of those plants? Maybe certain plants will serve different purposes as visual screens or as food sources for you and your family. There could be lots of different purposes the plants serve. Of course, again, what kind of moisture, what kind of sunlight, what kind of soil is available for these plants, and what size will they eventually reach. You might be buying seedlings from us that are 1 or 2 years old. They're teeny tiny, but you have to imagine what it will look like in 20 or 30 years, fully grown. All right, we talked about the power line issue, but other things, roof eaves, there's all kinds of infrastructure you want to make sure you work around. There could be underground infrastructure that you don't think about, but need to. And then again, are there existing plants and existing trees that are going to have an effect? And consider that when you're planting around them. All right, some of that's review. So I think we're good. I mean, again, just think about your goals. What do you want out of your property? What are the actual constraints and opportunities of your property? And then try to match those up and find the middle ground of the plants that will work for this area. And choosing the right plant for the area is really important. One thing that we do tell people when they're buying plants is that the east side adapted plants may tolerate west side more moisture environments, but the west side plants usually cannot move east just because they need more moisture and you don't have it out east. So think about that. Moving plants west can work. Same with moving south to north, like we're seeing, it depends on elevation, I shouldn't say that, but like California species are becoming more adaptable to Oregon and Washington these days due to climate change. So you still need to think about elevation. Not all plants will survive high elevation. and vice versa. I would be remiss to not mention a little bit more about oak woodlands. And again, if you have oak woodlands, make sure you're doing everything you can to protect them. This gorge area, especially in Klickitat County, is one of the only areas that provides habitat for the endangered western gray squirrel in Washington. So you can see on the map, we're just one of 3 in Washington State for this type of habitat. Oregon white oak is the natal den site for western gray squirrels, and they provide acorns for the food. So you'll often have Doug fir and ponderosa pine in that same plant community that's also integral to the habitat for western gray squirrel. But there's a lot we're doing to unfortunately destroy and disturb that habitat. So Oregon white oak is a very valuable species in this area. It's a very valuable habitat. And as much as you can do to protect it is great. It also happens to be fire resistant. So it's just because it's green and also made out of wood doesn't mean it's gonna burn really easily. It's one of the fire resistant plants. And here in the gorge, we're lucky to have the East Cascade Oak Partnership run by the Columbia Land Trust. It's a really valuable partnership of folks like us who are getting together and talking about how to manage for oaks and protect oaks, and how we can, still get what we need out of oak woodlands if it's grazing or other land uses, but hopefully protecting the oaks that are here. I think I'm gonna skip the video, but there is a video. It's all about wildlife habitat and wildfire and how to balance the two in your landscape with plants and with the types of plants you choose and maintain on your property. But this video was put out by Department of Natural Resources, and you can find it on our website. But you can basically search DNR wildfire wildlife, it'll come up. But it's all about having patches and diversity and wood piles and just a kind of a beautiful mess of things happening for both wildfire prevention and wildlife. So the two can really work hand in hand beneficially. So I'm not gonna review everything here, but again, right plant, right place. That's our mantra. We do really encourage planting in the early spring, as early as possible. That's why we have our spring sale, but planting in the fall is also really valuable. That's a great time to plant if you're not right on a rushing river that might wash everything away in the winter. You can really optimize the moisture through the fall and winter, and then those plants get a head start growing first thing in the spring too. So those are the 2 windows. Definitely mulch your plants to retain the moisture on those roots and around the plant as much as you can, and it prevents invasives from coming in or competition coming in to steal the water from that plant. And we do recommend irrigating plants just for the first year or 2 if you can. That's always going to increase your survival. Okay, this is probably obvious to some of you gardeners, but you'll be surprised how many people plant a bare root seedling incorrectly. And so, of course, on the left is correct, and then there's all kinds of ways a bare root seedling can be improperly planted. And we sell bare root plants mostly with our plant sale. So when you get a bare root, it's not the kind of plant that just comes in a pot all protected around with soil. You have to be really careful with those roots that are very sensitive, and then make sure that they all are pointing downward and that you have a big enough hole for those roots to really expand and reach water and grow properly. This is that cheat sheet that I have printed. So you'll see there's a bunch of different species listed, trees, shrubs, and some more leaf forbs and flowering ground covers. And then a lot of different criteria, sun, soil, moisture, and height that you can consider. So with that, I want to make sure to give credit to the folks who provided some of the information on these slides. Dan Richardson, who's not here, is at Underwood Conservation District and helped create some of these slides. And then, as I mentioned, our backyard habitat yard by yard program was borrowed in part from Columbia Land Trust backyard habitat program. So we've worked with Hood River Soil and Water CD a lot over the years. And they have their own native plant sale if you haven't heard about that. And they also have had a landscaping with less program that gave us some great ideas throughout the years. So give credit where credit's due. And with that, I just want to wrap up my portion of the presentation and see if there's any questions from anybody before we close the Zoom and move on to Melissa's presentation. Are there any questions? Yeah.
I have wondered where the line is between east and west. Cascades, are there some landmarks?
You can go to the Little White Sand and there's a line on the road. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. There's no definite line. And I think it'll depend, it's waivers, you know, depends on the aspect and where you are exactly. So I've always used kind of the Little White Salmon River as an informal boundary. But does anyone else have a perfect answer for that one? It's a gradient, but yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, look at the vegetation, you can see the line right up.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, where the
Good,
vegetation changes. Yeah. Good question though. Anybody
I
else?
did have a question. So the rose, we have that kind of rose on my grandfather's farm, and it's it takes over everything.
Mm,
So.
yeah, again,
Question is
depending on your own needs of the land, like if it's where your kids play or where you know, want to be able to walk and not get snagged, I mean, that's going to be one of the criteria for that space. And hopefully you can have other spaces that are more wild where the rose can thrive. So that's, again, where you kind of need to look at what your needs are and interests for that, the use of that land. But it does thrive, and I don't know exactly how you would, besides just cutting it back, we just pull it. Yeah. Yes.
This question may be too detailed, so you can pass on it if you need to, but I live on a small lot in town with 6 white oaks on it.
Okay.
Very small space with a lot of trees, and I really don't know how to get the leaves from the oak trees to decompose. And so I have a lot of kind of impermeable layers around the trees because they just tend to sit there year after year. So just wondering if you had any advice on that. And again, I realize it's very specific, so I can talk
Yeah,
to somebody later too.
that's interesting. Bill, do you have an idea?
Right here.
Just
Oh, I'm not worried about getting rid of the leaves. I want to incorporate them into the soil. So I can't grow anything else because
Yeah,
they just dominate and they're
Yeah.
fierce competitors if I try to plant anything around them, yeah.
Okay, is there a reason why you're wanting to move the leaves?
I don't want to move them. No, I want to incorporate them in the soil and I want to encourage them to break down. But you can just see year after year, they're actually, you know, piling up around my house and the soil, the grade level around my house is actually about 8 inches to a foot higher than anywhere else because they just get higher and higher.
You can create a big welded wire mesh, you know, kind of composting area. They do it, I mean, I've done it in landscapes for years.
I have,
They
yeah.
do it on Fifth Avenue in New York City. But, but the leaves have a lot of lignin in them,
Yeah,
so they need, carbon. So, you know, put some, garden compost in there, something that's dark, you know, really
Okay.
dark in it. So like, you know, dirt hugger soil or something, and do layers, sandwich layers, and it'll break down more quickly.
thanks.
But avoid, grass clippings because, you know, grass clippings have, you know, gas in them.
Great,
Yeah, at
thanks.
least I personally do. Or green cuttings from the rest of your landscape. If you layer them with green, anything, you know, any shrubs or get something from your neighbors, you know, that isn't, make sure it's not an invasive kind of plant, you know? And layer it, and that will help it break down.
Well, thank you.
and maybe chopping them up, if that would be reasonable at all, just to break it
You know,
up.
I tried I have a wire basket and I've
Okay.
even put them in a garbage can and run a weed whacker to chip them into like little tiny.
Yeah,
And that wire ring is like still there from 3 years ago. You know, it's just as high as when I built it.
Yeah, and then you want it in the summer, you just spray it with water to, you know, do the layers of compost and leaves and water it.
Okay.
And the worms will just come up and go down.
It's a great mulch. I think you could use
Yeah.
it anywhere you want to mulch your plants. Yeah.
I'll take it from my garden.
I was gonna say, you could share. There's so many people who do not have deciduous, you could share.
There you go. Leaf share. Okay. Other questions? Anybody on Zoom with a question by chance?
We had a few, but I think I covered them.
Yeah, nice. I put a few more links just to remind you of some of our programs. I've said it enough, but we have a native plant sale. And it ends February 29th. So make sure you get your order in. Unfortunately, things do sell out and that happens. So take a look at what's still left. And then Tree Fest, March 23rd, will be where you can pick up those plants and even buy single stems and more. The tool library, talk to James about that tonight if you want to. And then the yard by yard program, talk to Corey. And let us know. I know we've got a couple site visits with some of you in the room lined up, but we can come visit your property and give you ideas and talk about your specific questions and needs, depending on whatever you need there. So with that, I think we're gonna transition to Melissa. Okay.